So as Jessica said, we're going to go through a couple of key features. We're going to demo those key features. I'm going to go through some other useful stuff. I have to talk about workgroup because it wouldn't be appropriate to not do so, considering it no longer exists, and then a few other things to boot. So getting right into it. Oh, here, let me shut that down. All right. So if you guys already don't know, this is actually just a rehash slide from last year. Workgroup PDM no longer exists. It wasn't available in the installation media as of 2018. Again, they're retiring it because it's old technology. They can't scale it anymore. And ultimately, this is the reason why PDM Standard was developed as a sort of light version of PDM Professional. Even though Workgroup is not available in 2018, it will be supported throughout the year, but then after that, it goes the way of the dodo. So for anybody here who actually has Workgroup PDM, what do you do? Well, give your account manager a call. We can go in, we can help you set up PDM Standard or Professional, depending on which one you want to upgrade, and we have migration services as well. PDM Standard is a 3-day implementation. Professional is a 5-day implementation, at least suggested, plus my time to do the migration, which is dependent on the complexity of your existing vault. So we do want to help you do that. Give your account manager a call and we can go from there. So without further ado, let's talk about some of this new stuff that we've got in PDM 2018. So revision table integration. This is probably, I like to call it the final frontier of revision control within PDM. PDM obviously does great revision control, but it was always missing that integration with SOLIDWORKS revision tables, and they finally added that in 2018. So it's with respect to PDM, it supports the add revision action, in other words, the set variable and increment revision action for the PDM folk administrators out there. And it also works with the set revision function, which is typically done for legacy files that are being brought into the vault for the first time, okay? So some key things to note about the revision table integration. Everything has to be 2018. You will not be able to run this on anything 2017, be it SOLIDWORKS, PDM, or a file that is 2017 or earlier. The revision table has to pre-exist in the drawing. So it can be a blank revision table, but it has to exist. It's not going to create one for you. And the other big thing is that you can't use independent type revision tables. In other words, you can have one revision table and other tables linking to that other table, but you can't say if you have sheets, you can't have independent revision tables on each sheet. So with that in mind, let us do a demonstration. So I'm in my vault and I have a drawing here. It's just a simple drawing of a speaker thing. It's already checked out. I've already started a new release. If you look through it here, I've already got revision A. And if I open up the drawing, you can see here, I've already got a revision table and I've got revision A in there. So we're doing a minor change to this drawing. All I'm going to do is I'm going to add a revision here. And maybe I'll put a balloon. I don't have to put a balloon, but I'm going to put a balloon there. Okay, you'll see that nothing's been, other than the balloon being added and the line being added in the revision table or the row, nothing else has been added. Okay, so I'm just gonna save that. I'm gonna check it in. This is going to be Rev B. Just put a silly comment in there. All right. And I'm going to close this and move back to the vault view, and I'll explain why in a second. And then I'm going to proceed to put this through the workflow process. So I'm going to go pretend it's submit for review. Please check. Click OK. I'll pretend I'm both designer and manager just to keep things going. And I'm going to release the document. And here, now the way I've set it up is that the comment that goes here when the manager approves it is the comment that's going to go into the revision table. So I'm going to say something like, make it uppercase, as per ECO 12345. If you guys have ECN processes or ECO processes, okay? So now we are on Rev B. The other thing I've done here is I've actually got that note updating the description variable. Obviously, you wouldn't update description variable on the data card. You would probably have a series of other variables related to the revision details and so on and so forth. But again, this was just to get the ball rolling. So now if I open up this drawing, and I don't have to check it out, you will see that the revision table has been populated accordingly. We've got Rev B, because that's what it was done. There's my comment, there's my date, and then because I was logged in as the administrator and those are the initials of the administrator, those were applied as well. So that's one example of how revision integration works, and that's just through your standard workflow process. The other thing that we can do is we can use the set revision function. So again, I have a second example here. This drawing's already been issued, but it's Rev C on the card because it's Rev C on the drawing. So this is a legacy file that was pushed through the system, but I didn't want to push it through our actual revision process because it would just go back to A at that point. So what I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to go set revision. And I'm going to say I want it to be C, which is what matches on the card. And I might as well do it to the part as well. Make sure I update the variable. And then in this comment here, I'm just going to say approved revision on drawing. Click OK. So now my set revision has updated C. If I go into my history window, you can see I've gone straight to C. I haven't gone A, B, C, because that's kind of the point of set revision. And again, if I open up this drawing, you will see that the revision table, which already existed in the drawing, added a new line, no bubble or anything, with the applicable details. So there's two examples of how the new revision table integration works, either through the workflow or through the set revision function. All right, next thing that we are going to talk about, branching and merging. I know that this has been an enhancement request made by many people in order to be able to create multiple designs, prototyping, handle change processes without actually messing around or affecting the original design until I'm ready to kind of port those changes back into the system. So again, prototyping, that's one example. Dealing with change processes, and you want to, like, say, do your changes, but you want to come up with a couple of iterations and then decide which one you want to use and actually update the original design. And also working with external vendors. So what you could do is you could branch a portion of your assembly to a folder that only the third-party contractors have access to, and they in turn don't have access to the rest of the vault. They can make their changes, and then you can merge their changes back into the original design. So as an example here I have my assembly, and then I decide whether it's prototyping or an ECM process or working with vendors, I decide to make a couple of copies. So I copy it or I branch it out, and I decide I want 2 iterations. I work on it, I make a change to the part, which in turn updates the subassembly and main assembly. I do that twice. I decide I want to go with my second option. That's the better option to go with. Once that's done, I then run the merge functionality, which will automatically add those changes back into my original assembly and update the version number accordingly. So let's take a look at that. So if I go into my sample files here, I already have a system set up. So for those of you familiar with our SOLIDWORKS Essentials course, this is my universal joint here. And what I've done is I've already done a couple of branches. I'll actually show you how it's run. But in here, what I've done is I've done modifications to the crank subassembly. I've added some materials, changed some fillets, and I've done that a couple of times. Just made some different modifications. So how do I do that copy? Well, what I'm going to do, so let's say I want to do a 4th iteration of this. So I select the assembly that I want to tweak, or part, or main assembly, it doesn't really matter. I could select the top level assembly if I wanted to, okay? And actually, I've done 3. I just created the folder for this. So let's do this 3rd iteration. So I go into my top level assembly and I select a branch. And then I have to give it a branch name. By the way, this should look very familiar to everybody. It's basically copy tree, just with a couple of tweaks to this. So I'm going to call this option 3. Oop, I'm in caps locks. So option 3. I got to pick my destination folder, in which case it's option 3. And then I got to select the files that I want to actually make a copy of. In this case, I want to say the crank subassembly. And again, just like everything else, I'm going to say name the files after the drawing. And in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename the drawings, and I'm actually just going to add a prefix to it. Okay, we're going to call this option 3. So there I go. Again, just like copy tree, really the only difference was that I had to give it a branch name. Click branch. Where? Now if I go into option 3, there you can see, oh, and I made a mistake. I should have renamed all, but I didn't actually select all files to rename. I always do that in copy tree. But in any case, it does actually work like copy tree. Okay, so I make my changes, I make my designs. Oh, and by the way, if you have, like, say, dozens of iterations of a file and you're trying to figure out what it is, what you can do is you can select the file, and I actually have information here. So I can go to associated branches, and you can see that I've made 3 of them, and I can actually click on that and get some more details on all the items that I've branched. Conversely, if I click on the history window, I can see how many branches I've created as part of that process. So I've decided, I'm looking at my changes here. The manager's decided, oh, you know what, let's go not with option 1 because the material you've picked is too expensive or something like that. Let's go with option 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select option 2, and then in the tools menu, I am going to say merge. And the merge window, again, looks very much like the copy tree. And all I have to do is I select what stuff I want to merge into the system. So I'm going to merge latest. And you can see here that I am actually going to merge everything because I've actually made changes to all these files. I think if I just cancel out of this and I go to 1 and I do merge, nope, I changed all the files. But if I wanted to keep the original file, I could actually choose that on the fly. So let me go back to option 2, click on tools, merge, and I could say, oh, you know what, crankshaft, that I was playing around with it, but I actually just want to say, go back to the source. Okay, so I'm going to merge these 3 particular items. Okay. Again, I could rename it if I really wanted to. I have some other merge choices in there. I could actually create new files and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. I could even check in on the merge. I'm going to say I'm using option 2. I go ahead and I run the merge. And now if I go back to my original design, and I'm not going to check it out, you will see that it has been automatically updated, referenced, and everything is back in there with my changes from option 2. And if I go look at the history of this particular file, so this is the top level assembly itself. I probably still have to do a merge, but if I go to the original crank subassembly and I look at its history, you can see there that I've done a merge there. So that's basically branching and merging, and there's no limitation on what to do, on how many branches you can do. And I could say I merged option 1 and then I changed my mind and I can merge option 2. The sky's the limit. There are, I was at SOLIDWORKS World about a month ago, I guess, and we did have like a bunch of additional suggestions for merge. So definitely look for some enhancements to this first iteration. And that's pretty much branch and merge. So just a summary here, works exactly like copy tree. Really the only extra step that you have to do is create a branch name. Other than that, it's exactly the same as copy tree. All the information for your branches is easily accessible. I can see details on each of the branches that I've created, and it's maintained and stored in the history of the overall file. And then when it comes to the merge, pretty much like copy tree again. The big thing to note in the merge is that I have these options and I can choose to merge my changes. I could actually just say, nope, I don't want to use it. I just want to use the source file, or I can create new files to add to the assembly on the file, on the fly. And again, it shows up in the history. So those are the two live demos that I'm going to do. Now I'm just going to talk about the other new functions that are in the system just to keep the ball rolling. So for the PDM standard users out there, they have ported some of the convert task functionality down to you guys. However, it is limited. So what you guys can do now is you can now auto-produce PDFs off of drawing files. And the task itself does have limitations. In professional, you can choose different machines to run the task, and you have sort of more options to deal with that PDF. You can create separate PDFs if you have multiple sheets and so on and so forth, whereas this one, it's all going to happen within one particular file. I will be creating a custom document for the PDM standard users on how to set this up because it is new to you guys. But if you want to look at it right now, all the instructions are in the What's New PDM 2018 guide. So that's a big enhancement to the PDM standard users. Big enhancement for everybody. I don't know if anybody here uses conditions in their workflows, but if you do, you probably know how annoying it is to have a generic warning that just says conditions not met. You don't actually know what's going on or why you can't push a file from one state to another. They've done a lot of work on this, and they've actually made it so that you can present the conditions as they are configured in the administration program and have those present to the user on the fly. If you have a single configuration, it'll actually tell you that condition, as you can see in the two bottom screenshots here. So, you know, it won't go because the file is supposed to be in this folder or description variable is supposed to contain something, so on and so forth. If you have more than one condition, it's a hyperlink, which you then click and it will bring up a prompt and it will show you all the different conditions that it may or may not have failed on when you were trying to transition a file. So definitely a good thing both for users to find out what they did, did wrong or they omitted, and really good for the administrators when they're setting up the workflows and troubleshooting and so on and so forth. Again, for the PDM standard users, there's a function that's been available to the PDM professional users, which was the ability to export your search results. This was in the dedicated search window, again, only available in PDM Professional, and they've taken those two functions and they've put it in the integrated search window, thus making it available to PDM standard users. So you run your search and then you have these two buttons, you just click on it and it will export either to Excel or you can save it to a CSV file, which essentially makes your search results kind of a mini report, which is very handy. In my eyes, and then as a trick, what maybe your administrators could do is they could create a search results window that has the fields of information that you would want to show in a typical report. So you're essentially using the search results as a reporting tool. Again, if you're kind of wondering what I'm talking about, simply send a ticket to support@cadmicro.com and I can explain that a little bit further, but very useful tool. Non-SOLIDWORKS CAD file reference support. For the folks out there who are working with Inventor, Solid Edge, Creo, and that sort of things, those sort of things, you can now manage that information and the references in PDM. So this is done through 3D Interconnect for those of you who are using it. So you create your references. So if you look at my little screen over here, I've got like a SOLIDWORKS assembly, but it's actually referring to a bunch of Inventor parts. So I do that through Interconnect, and then what I can do is I can check in everything, including the Inventor files, into the vault. And once that's there, I now have access to all the stuff that you would with regular SOLIDWORKS files, including contains, where used, bill of material information, your data card information. Basically, it's kind of like it's just another SOLIDWORKS file. So again, if you're working with non-SOLIDWORKS files, big enhancement there. For those of you who are using inspection, this is a professional only thing. The inspection files can now be managed and maintained in the vault, and we have integration. So it's the same sort of ribbon that you would see in Microsoft Office. Again, this is PDM Professional or AutoCAD or something like that. So the file can be opened and checked out and checked in and maintained. And also the big thing here is with respect to the metadata. So you can actually take the metadata from the inspection project and link it to your data cards in PDM, just like you would SOLIDWORKS files. So again, useful function, one-stop information if you are using SOLIDWORKS inspection. For those of you who are using Creo, again, professional only, they've added another add-in for this program, again, like Microsoft Office, Solid Edge, and all those other products that you get the little add-in where you can do your typical PDM functions, check in, check out, get latest, all that kind of jazz. You can copy hyperlinks now. And this is actually a SOLIDWORKS 2018 thing. They've added a new system variable in 2018 where you can actually see what version that file was last saved in. They've ported that system variable into PDM, and that's something that you can now glean inside the PDM vault. Again, a big issue with SOLIDWORKS because, as we all know, there's no backwards compatibility. So if you're running SOLIDWORKS 2017, you can now know right off the bat if the files that you got from like a vendor or a third-party contractor, if it's saved in a newer file format, and then take the appropriate steps. For the professional users and the tasks, they've increased the convert task functionality to be able to handle flat pattern part files for sheet metal, and you can now produce DXFs and DWGs. It used to be that only drawing files you could make DXFs and DWGs off of drawing files. So now it's now working with sheet metal. And finally, serial numbering now supports mirrored parts. So that's the user side of things. Now we'll talk about the administrative side of things. So I just wanted to talk about the actual revision table integration on the administration side of things. It's fairly straightforward, although there are some tricks. Basically, it's 3 basic steps. You map your variables to a new block name that exists. You then you go to the new revision table node in administration, and you set it up there. And then you go into your workflow and you make the necessary adjustments to the actions and the transitions in the workflow. There is a warning thing here. If you remember previously when I talked about you couldn't use independent type tables, there's an actual warning that you can create to make it a full-fledged stop when somebody tries to check in a file and they've used those other tables that are not working with revision table integration. So they added that as well. And just a little side note here, the toolbox node has actually been moved into this new node called SOLIDWORKS. So you won't see toolbox off the bat. What you'll see is a new SOLIDWORKS node, and in there's revision table and toolbox. With respect to the revision table integration instructions, I have a detailed set of instructions. So if they don't go out with the webinar today or tomorrow, then you can contact Support CAD Micro, and we'll make sure to give you a copy of that. This is a big one. This is a huge one. For those of you who administer PDM, there is now an undo button in the data card editor. Big bone of contention for people who do this kind of work. There's really not much more to say. It works just like any other undo button. Just one thing to note, that it goes as far back as 20 data card edits, obviously pre-save. If you do a save, then you lose any sort of undos before that save, just like any other undo button. They've added some additional folder permission assignments and made it a little bit easier. In previous versions, you had to go one folder at a time to set the applicable permissions at a group or user level. They have now made it that you can multi-select folders and batch update permissions depending on the number of folders that you've clicked. Again, selecting folders is just like selecting folders in Windows Explorer or anything like that. And it uses the same conventions as with the user settings, where you have like a check mark that every folder, every permission is set the same, no checkbox, every folder, every permission is not checked, or there might be some permissions within that folder. Some are checked and some are unchecked. So same convention with the user and group settings that have been in PDM for a long time. For those of you who have been part of my implementations, you have heard me talk about these godlike permissions that the system administrator has. Well, they've taken one of those godlike permissions and they've actually made it a permission that you can designate to other people or other groups, and that's the undo checkout files that are checked out by other users. So if nobody remembers the system administrator password, or the one person who is the system administrator and they're not around, you can give that to a specific person or group, and they will be able to undo any checkouts of files that were checked out by another user, and that user is no longer at the company, or they're sick, or they're just generally not available. And this specific function is actually tracked in the history, because it used to be a godlike permission, and now if somebody does it, you need to make sure you know who did it in case they did it in error. So for the people who copy existing files, which I'm assuming is everybody here, you probably know that when you did a copy of a file, or at least the administrators did, you couldn't fully clear values out of variables and data cards when doing a copy. And I'm not talking about the copy tree, I'm just talking about doing a straight up copy and paste or save as or something like that. So what they've done is they've actually added an extra setting in the default values here where you can actually clear out values when somebody wants to make a new file out of an existing value, an existing file. Previously you had to select text value and you had to put a space in the box down below, which was a workaround at best, but probably not the most elegant way of doing it. So they've added an enhancement to that. This one's kind of cool. Talking about doing a copying of existing files. It used to be that when you used the copy tree and you wanted to reset values, all you could do was manual entries or manual values. But now what they've done is they've made it so that you can reset variables using system variables as opposed to whatever you typed in the window. So that's just an enhancement. So you can add, so for example, whoever's running the copy tree, you can actually put in the drawn by field, for example, the new person's initials. That's something that had to be set down the road, either through the workflow process or manually selected. Now you can do it as part of the copy tree function. For those of you who use the file version upgrade tool, so this is the tool to upgrade all your files when you upgrade PDM from say 2017 to 2018, or SOLIDWORKS from 2017 to 2018, or 2014 to 2015. Think of Task Manager, or sorry, Task Scheduler, but for PDM. They've made a bunch of enhancements to it. It works quicker. You can select multiple projects. Upgraded statistics and monitoring, the fact that you can pause and resume for those people who have thousands of files in their vaults. Notifications can go out, and it actually works a little bit better with files that are currently checked out. In previous versions, it didn't handle checked out files very well. That's why one of the rules that had to go out that says, before I run this upgrade tool, all the files have to be checked in. So it does handle checked out files better than that. And for those of you who have never used this before or didn't know it existed, I actually just put in a little note in here. If you go to your installation media, in SWPDM clients support file version upgrade, you'll find the utility in there. Just run it, install it on your client machine or machines, because you can actually have multiple machines running the upgrade at any one time, and go into the help file and you can see how it all works. Again, if you want some more information on the file version upgrade tool, just give me a shout or send an email to support@cadmicro and we'll get you some more information. Last but not least, for those of you who are using SQL Server 2008 or Windows Server 2008 R2, it is no longer supported in 2018. I've already had a couple of instances of this where people wanted to upgrade, and the most I could upgrade them to was 2017 SP5 because their servers were old. So if you are planning to upgrade to 2018 in the near future, make sure that your SQL and your server, Windows Server, is 2012 R2 or something like that. Go online, look at the minimum, the system requirements for PDM, and make sure that your infrastructure can handle the upgrade. And for PDM professional users, for you keeners out there who like to do some programming and stuff like that, they've done some enhancements. They've added some more calls and functions. And the cool thing out of all that is you can actually add your own tabs to the Vault View interface for whatever purposes, separate out information, so on and so forth. Comparison matrix, I talk about this every year. I've updated it with the new functions and features in 2018. So if you want a comparison matrix, maybe for the PDM standard users who are talking about maybe upgrading to a PDM professional, this is a detailed list that tells you what is in standard versus what in professional. And again, we'll make this available with the webinar after we're done. So with that being said, are there any questions? I will let Jessica take the floor.